AFRADEBI is an African-based social enterprise advocating for rapid African economic development through increased economic and business investment. You see, our core belief is that Africa's development agenda should be driven by Africans themselves. We're deeply passionate about Africa's socioeconomic development in line with our mission, where we advocate for the utilization of Africa's oil and gas resources to foster social development, economic growth, job creation, as well as to combat poverty. AFRADEBI stands for advocating for rapid African development through economic and business investment, while UTFOG really is, utilization of Africa's oil and gas to fight poverty and drive economic growth. Firstly, let's address scale. Uganda is not alone in building oil pipelines. Globally, there are over 306,000 kilometers of oil pipelines, with ECOP comprising of just about 0.47% of that number. Moreover, Africa's contribution to the global carbon emissions is only around 4%, with Uganda and Tanzania contributing about 0.02 and 0.04% respectively. So that's just a look at the scale. The two countries where the pipeline passes, that is Uganda and Tanzania, are both low-income countries with GDP per capita of around just $1,000. In comparison to wealthier, high-income oil-producing countries where nearly 50% of global oil production comes from. These are countries like the US, Canada, UAE, Norway, or Saudi Arabia, etc., which have GDP per capita between $32,000 to as high as $99,000. Now, when you look at these two comparisons and how low the income levels in Uganda and Tanzania are, you can easily understand how badly Uganda needs, these oil revenues to, drive socioeconomic growth, combat poverty, provide, critical services to its citizens. Let's talk about Uganda. Uganda is among the world's 30 poorest countries and has around 42% of its population living below the poverty line of less than $2 a day. And Tanzania finds itself within the same poverty bracket. In light of this, shouldn't we be encouraging Uganda to utilize its oil resources to aid in fighting poverty and driving development? Or should we listen to what these Western climate activists are dictating to us? That oil and gas resources should only be utilized by wealthier countries and who are already rich, and are getting richer. What could these resources do? Let's take that question for a moment. Because you see, both Uganda and Tanzania are countries with humongous development needs in respect to, government services being provided to their people in terms of electricity, roads, water infrastructure, and health, as well as education. When you look at statistics, the situation is quite dire. For instance, only 22% of Uganda's population have direct access to electricity from the national grid. Still in Uganda, just about 5% of the country's total road network is tarmacked. Thus, 95% of the roads in Uganda are unpaved. Now, Uganda requires resources in terms of government revenue that the Uganda Oil Project can provide. Now, this ECOP pipeline is crucial in unlocking these resources so Ugandan citizens can benefit. Also worth mentioning is that both Uganda and Tanzania have very large youth populations. For instance, 47% of Uganda's population is under the age of 15 years. This means the population pyramid structure of Uganda and Tanzania places an even greater burden on these respective governments. So to summarize on your question regarding the ECOP oil pipeline, what we have here is a case of Western climate activists telling Uganda and poor African countries that they cannot use their oil and gas resources to develop. Even though the carbon emissions from Africa have hardly contributed to the current global warming situation we are in, ultimately, the end results of their action will only keep millions of Ugandan citizens stuck in poverty and keep Uganda as a low-income country for much longer.